risk appetite. The panel have already been introduced, so we're really looking at a shift away from Capitol Hill in many ways to capital markets. And institutions now need to look at where can they operate, under which rules, and indeed, at what level of risk. So, we're going to kick off first question, Katherine, I'm going to come to you. And we're going to look at regulatory collaboration or indeed fragmentation. So from your seat, you're working with institutional allocators every single day of the week. Are they really chasing true clarity, or are they shopping for sort of a good enough jurisdiction in which to do business?
Is this working?
It's working perfectly.
All right, excellent. They are in fact chasing regulatory clarity. We do a lot of work with institutions. We spend a lot of time speaking with them, and one of the biggest gating items keeping institutional capital in the U.S. out of these markets has been the fact of a lack of regulatory clarity, and that is why some of them are sitting on the sidelines. It's the biggest thing that they've asked for, and those of us in the industry who've been working on getting regulatory clarity over the last several years, it's been one step forward, two steps back, because of, as you may be familiar, the prior head of the SEC, Gensler, created a hostile environment for crypto businesses that in fact chased a lot of business off the shores of the US into other areas. Just moved further along the curve and were embracing innovation and technology and coming up with rules of the road. So that makes sense, supply and demand. If there's a jurisdiction that's creating a better roadmap for it, where you're not going to be brought up on criminal charges, you were likely going to choose that. Fast forward to November of last year, even before that, in the run-up to the election in the United States, a lot of us in the industry were actively listening to Trump and to Kamala Harris to see how many times were they mentioning crypto, AI, or just general macro mentioning of embracing innovative technology. Because it had, both sides of the aisle in the US realized that the Biden administration was not doing right by innovation. And that got to a point where it didn't matter whether you were Republican or you were a Democrat, there was a flavor that the technology was not being embraced. So in that, and that's actually one of the many reasons that the baton was shifted to Kamala Harris. Run-up, obviously Trump was elected. He made a number of very positive and active comments about views on crypto generally, Bitcoin specifically, and what he and his administration would do in the months that followed. And as we've been seeing, there's been a tremendous amount of activity in the US, and it presents an opportunity for the US to finally reverse some of the stagnation that we've had around regulatory clarity. So that's why you're seeing a momentum shift, and it's a positive momentum shift. And the hope right now is that we grab that bull by the horns and get things done and don't fumble the ball while the momentum is there. So that's what we're seeing. But the long answer to your short question is yes, institutions desperately want the regulatory clarity because they don't want to be jumping in and making investments in an area that's ultimately going to get them in trouble because of the lack of that clarity.
Fantastic, thank you. And Abdullah, Katherine mentions Gensler chased quite a lot of folks offshore. A number of them came here to the UAE, including Abu Dhabi, the capital where you guys are set up. Did you see a massive influx of institutional capital and other folks saying, look, we're looking to come here, like Blockdaemon have also done, and I'll come on to Andrew in a second to talk about his experience, but what have you seen in the UAE?
In my opinion, the past couple of years saw a big inflow of companies and projects and investment funds, VCs into this region over the last couple of years. And it's not about other regulators only chasing them out. It's about basically there is an innovation in the regulatory mindset here in the city. They actually understand, okay, what's opening up to innovation and to clarity for what projects need, what exchanges need from one side or investment managers need from another side. So there has been actually a mindset of let's start to change the frameworks, let's start to do sandboxing ecosystems, let's start to create an actual mindset that people would set up even their global headquarters here in the region, and that's how it's been for the last couple of years. From another side, I also see like this place is turning into the next New York or Silicon Valley, as we say. I remember I met James a couple of days ago, and we were explaining what's going to happen in terms of ecosystem change in Abu Dhabi in particular, and it's a mindset that people would have think in the next 10 years, and they're already thinking about it this year. So people have already been seeing I want to do X or I want to do Y, and they could start it immediately. Even when it comes to the free zone regulators today. Right now we see people going to the federal regulator that would shift the narrative into other GCC countries as well, and then start expanding to Asia. So that's what we actually want to see. I myself have been speaking to many regulators from around the world when they come to Abu Dhabi, and basically all questions to me and our CEO Jay here is basically, how could we do what we did in Abu Dhabi in those countries? Even countries like Seychelles, shockingly, they speak to us and say okay, we have a list of exchanges even set up as their headquarters, but we are afraid for them to leave, and what should we do? So I always see it's about not regulatory clarity, but about how can you innovate regulations, because you're in a space that changes within a span of a week. 1 week something happens, another week something else happens. So how can they adapt with that? And that's what we would love to see always.
Speed is absolutely essential by the sounds of it. And Andrew, I'm coming to you here, right? You guys set up in Abu Dhabi last year. We'd love you to talk a little bit about that decision, the experience, and now what you're hoping to get out of not just the UAE, but the region and the gateway that Abdullah was talking about.
Yeah, so we're a US headquartered company, right? And as Katherine has said, we've seen the similar situations, right, and transitions. For us, we're global. We've had a large EMEA presence. Last year we set up in Abu Dhabi, a fantastic experience. We also speak to regulators globally. The model for Abu Dhabi works for us really well. So we set up with ADGM, and going through that process and creating our entity, talking with the team, doing some educational work around staking, because that's what we do a lot. We do a lot of POS chain staking for institutions. It was a really positive process, and so for us, we put it right at the top of the engagements that we have with regulators globally as well. So all set up. I moved to the UAE. I was in Singapore before that as well. We made the decision we needed somebody on the leadership team here as well. So for us, it's been a really positive experience. And recently we've been onboarding a few clients in the region as well, and setting up with ADGM and going through all the processes has made that really smooth for us as well. So overall, a really positive experience on our side as well. Really happy with the decision. We are seeing now a lot, of leadership team, decision makers in EMEA kind of move here as well. We're seeing folks that are bouncing, Abu Dhabi, New York, 6 months on, 6 months off. So you're starting to see that formation of leadership team, decision makers, companies, building out here as well. So it's really exciting to see.
Fantastic. And JJ, I want to come to you because Input Output also building a number of markets that others don't or won't. How's your experience been? How are you guys selecting some of the emerging markets that we're not talking about here, US, UAE, some of the big global players trying to build crypto innovation hubs? What's been your experience in some of the more emerging markets?
Sure. So one of the projects that we're working on is a set of hub and spoke offices, because different jurisdictions offer different advantages. Obviously, there's a lot of talent here, a lot of capital, a lot of product expertise. One of our offices now, obviously we have a Colorado global headquarters. I just helped open our Buenos Aires office where we're going to do our mobile development, for instance. Great talent. The world over, folks are looking for jobs. They're looking for a place where they can build the future, and they're looking for a way to bring great honor and credibility to their country. We find that in Argentina, we find that all over the world. And we're excited to continue to build out our network. We call it a sensory network, where we bring on advisors, we bring on investors, all sorts of folks, all walks of life, to create the best products possible, great protocols. And we are super interested in bringing our talent also to UAE and learning from the folks here to create the future here as well. So.
Fantastic, thank you. Jason, let's talk about some of the risks here, right? From your vantage point at Fireblocks, where's the hesitation? Is it sometimes around operational risk? Is it regulatory risk? Is it political risk? Is it a combination, or is it something else entirely?
In terms of individual institutions?
Institutions moving to certain jurisdictions, like what's their risk profile for, or how's the decision-making framework they're looking at?
Yeah, I really think that question depends on what kind of institution you're talking about, right? So in the United States, we have great public companies. We also have regulated institutions. Some public companies are really worried about headline risk, right? So anything that can move that stock price or impact it in a negative way, those managers are beholden to not just the board of directors, but shareholders and the media, and that becomes a very uncomfortable situation. So you don't want to move too fast, too soon, right? I think you have a similar story with regulated institutions, right? Regulated institutions are in a process of actively managing a relationship with a regulator. And if you do something to damage that relationship, it's not only going to impact you, I think, directly in the space where you may have misstepped, right? But it's going to potentially impact your other business plans, all the other things that you want to do with that regulator. So I think for that cohort of companies, we have seen a real reluctance. I do think we're moving into hopefully a new cycle. We'll get into some of the opportunities there around that. But obviously we have, with all these innovative companies, we have jurisdictions like the UAE that's welcomed them and said, come here, develop here, we want you here. And then we have business models and operating models already that I think are already today really suited to participate in the digital asset space. I'm thinking about payments companies in particular. We're seeing a huge uptick in interest from payment service providers and merchants, all of this around stablecoins. And obviously, the trading sector has been hugely involved. And I think with the story around Bitcoin ETFs and the availability of Bitcoin exposures, we're only seeing that trend accelerate.
Brilliant. I want to stay on exactly that topic and talk about narratives now. So sort of segueing into what really unlocks serious institutional capital inflows. Katherine, deep in the ETF trenches for a long time. Thank you for your service and also congratulations. Bitcoin
Those
ETFs.
were long, hard years getting that passed.
The Bitcoin ETFs, tokenized real-world assets, stablecoins, big driving narratives at the moment. Will this continue the rest of the year? Are there narratives people are not talking about they should be that are going to get institutions excited?
We're almost at close to 80 filings for ETFs other than Bitcoin, ETH, or some combination thereof. There are a number of Twitter folks that keep active lists of these and who's filing. It's gotten to the point where you file an entity in Delaware, which is pretty run-of-the-mill boring, and that triggers a news story because the question is, okay, which of these other than Bitcoin and ETH are going to make it into an ETF wrapper in the United States. Obviously, there are other jurisdictions that already have these products. U.S. has been behind in this regard, and it took a tremendous amount of effort to get the spot Bitcoin ETF out the door, and the spot ETH. In fact, there was a flavor, we thought that the spot ETH would be further delayed because of the taxonomy question with regard to whether ETH was a security or a commodity. We're kind of now moving a little bit beyond that kind of black and white question with the current momentum we're seeing and the movement, hopefully, happening within Congress that has been occurring to get to market structure legislation where there will be some definitions and more rules of the road. But with regard to the ETFs, tons of filing. We have a new SEC head, as most of you are probably aware, who is a veteran who is also familiar with these businesses, was previously at the SEC, but also knows how these businesses operate. We have one of the commissioners who used to be in the minority side, who now is running the crypto task force, and has put a number of questions out to those of us in the industry. Many of us are participating in various work streams to answer questions that will help the SEC and also help Congress with regard to writing the legislation around these areas that have been obstacles. And this is to try to migrate the rules that previously existed that really didn't fit these assets, the traditional finance rules, that there was an attempt to jam this current technology into those into those spaces where it just didn't fit. So we're kind of moving away from that. But all that to say is there's still work to be done with the SEC in terms of getting these, other than Bitcoin and ETH, ETFs out. So a number of us in the industry are in that process right now, dialoguing with the SEC and trying to get a framework that will help launch these types of products. Because a lot of technical reasons I won't get into, but there are differences in how you can launch these products versus Bitcoin and ETH because of the existence of robust futures markets for those products that don't exist for some of the other digital assets. So we're looking at other ways and other angles to be able to pass through some of the SEC's hurdles. Even with the new, more pro-crypto leading SEC, they still have to do their day jobs and make sure that these are safe products and that the disclosures are appropriate for them. So that's what's going on right now behind the scenes. Lots of conversations and lots of filings.
I want to pick up on an important angle that you brought up, which is are institutions coming for crypto maybe as an asset class or the rails underneath? And maybe Jason, I'll throw this over to you guys at Fireblocks because I think you might have an interesting perspective on it.
Well, having the rails in place and infrastructure in place is a necessary precondition to having the ecosystem that we want, right? But I think the answer here is both, and I actually think what we're seeing is the start of a sort of virtuous cycle, and I hope the United States takes a leadership position in that. But the thesis I would put out to you is there's one thing on the investment side, right? And again, for me, happy to have Bitcoin be in the dominant position, although happy to see other products as well. But right, with the Bitcoin ETF, we expanded the availability of exposure to Bitcoin, a digital asset, to a much broader group, not only of investors, but also retail market participants, right? And I think what this is doing as the price of BTC appreciates, right, it creates a really good feeling of goodwill towards the asset class, which I think spills over into the entire crypto ecosystem, right? And so what we're seeing is, again, more investment, creates more goodwill, more interest, creates more investment, right? And then, again, this creates a thesis around investment being a driving force in the eventual institutional adoption. The other side, again, I'm going to talk again about payments and stablecoins. I think what people don't appreciate about stablecoin legislation or the introduction of stablecoins as a use case, right, is that it will require a very serious infrastructure replatforming, not only of our financial institutions, but our broader system of commerce. And I mean by that you will have to have in place the rails, the payments rails connecting those financial institutions to retail users, as well as merchants. Everyone's going to have the ability to send and receive. Everybody's going to have the ability to hold. What this does, right, is that it creates a massive opening. Because if you're a bank and you just invested in a very expensive cryptocurrency security platform or whatever it is, right, it's only a matter of time before a very smart person at Goldman Sachs sits in that building and says, how do I enhance the ROI on this investment, this sunk infrastructure cost? And it's only a matter of time before they look around the room and say, oh my gosh, we're sitting on all these other real world assets. And then those start going out the door. Right, and then again, it's this virtuous cycle that's being created because we have the distribution network in place. We created it when we introduced stablecoins into the system of commerce, and so again, I see a path towards a much more digital asset enabled society, and I really think we're in the start of that cycle, at the beginning of that path right now.
Thank you very much. And Abdullah, coming on to you, but from a different angle, right? Less from institutions looking perhaps at the Middle East and Middle Eastern institutions looking out, or indeed at products in the region. What are the sovereign wealth funds, the family offices here looking for? Is it narrative? Is it yield? Is it infrastructure? Is it a combination?
It's a combination of everything. First of all, it's when it comes to tokenization of real-world assets or all of these things. I don't know, like if you guys know, digital securities or tokenized securities are gonna come up in June. So that's the first thing that you're gonna start doing here. You guys can call it any asset class starts becoming a tokenized security, and the reason behind that and what interests, like you said, the sovereign funds and all of these things is basically what we actually believe in, you know. Open up trading 24/7 into stock markets, pouring in liquidity globally into this region, and allowing users to actually understand the new era of digital systems, in my opinion. what family offices or the sovereign funds always look at is what kind of products they could use to set, let's say, their expectations in what they want to do. You know, for my example, like, not being biased here, but Fireblocks is a very good product in my opinion, and what the guys do and the services they offer, that's something of interest they look at in this region. You know, like actually navigating what kind of companies that are building services that actually interests the general public and the private institutions itself. And I would like to thank you all. Unfortunately, I have to hard stop here and enjoy to the rest of it.
Please do. Thank you, Dylan. Good luck with your meeting. I know you have to run. Andrew, we're going to come to you as a follow-on from that. And I often think about a holy trinity of compliance, custody, and capital efficiency. When institutions are committing capital, where is it they're really leaning?
Yeah, so I think it starts with their custody solution, and then they're looking for what are they going to participate in, and James brought this up as well, whether it's RWA, stablecoins as well. On our perspective, we see a lot of institutions thinking also about ETFs, also talking to us about topics like staking as well, right? Different institutions have different risk profiles, and they work out exactly how they want to participate in the digital asset ecosystem. So we talk a lot to them about, hey, you're going to do a variety of things. Let's have a conversation around staking as well. That can be your blockchain, internet bond, kind of low risk kind of return model as well. And whilst they pursue other strategies as well and work out, how do they want to step into this space? So that's a lot of the conversations that we're having, with institutions.
And JJ, there seems to be a narrative around there's a lot of there's some standards in traditional finance that have now become established, but there's this massive potential of decentralized finance in the DeFi space. How are institutions thinking about the dichotomy between TradFi and DeFi?
So we think about blockchain in terms of generations. For instance, Bitcoin is value transfer, decentralized, secure. You get programmability with smart contracts layer with Ethereum and what have you. You get scalability and interoperability and some on-chain governance. That's kind of where we are today. That's where we, IOHK, now input-output, work on Cardano and Midnight. And those both have on-chain governance, and they're hugely scalable. And the infrastructure is ready now to see both privacy and identity go on-chain. So when you bake that in, you have a bunch of customers where they have a really strong notion of identity, and they can start to interact with regulated products at that point. And our chain launching at the end of the year here, a ZK chain, Midnight, we think will be an amazing DeFi product because you can start to put all sorts of different assets once you have, like I said, identity, but also privacy on chain. Because nobody wants to put their trading strategy on a blockchain because they'll just trade against you. But if you can shield some of that knowledge, then you can have different kinds of assets on chain for the first time. Which is exciting because we think that these kinds of products will revolutionize how people purchase regulated assets. So we're very, very excited about that.
Nice, and I'm glad you brought up security and privacy, because that's obviously a massive topic for institutions. Jason, how many times are institutions saying that? Is this stuff really, really secure? And also, how much do they care about the privacy element here?
I think the privacy element is really interesting. I'll just start there because when you look globally, there are privacy protections in place, and there are places that care a lot about privacy. And I would single out, for example, the European Union. But actually, I think there are a lot of places that are less from a legal perspective. Have embarked on the project of protecting privacy. I also think there's this element of consumer expectation, right? So I just went to the airport to travel here. And I have willingly given away my face so I can cut that line, right? And so I think from the consumer perspective, right, there is a lot in terms of privacy we would be willing to give away if we saw the utility value come back to us. I think this is the kind of one of the interesting things about going on-chain with digital identity. I think there's a huge, huge potential for value unlock if we do go that way. There's also a huge potential for dystopian outcomes of all various sorts, right? And so I think understanding ourselves, understanding what we're willing to give away in exchange for what, and what kind of Web3 environment do we want, I think this is really interesting about privacy. The other context folks worry about privacy, right, is always in the public versus private blockchain conversation. Fireblocks is very much a company where you come to read and write to public blockchains. That doesn't mean that there aren't, again, utility value to private blockchains and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. We've seen the transition. We've started, we're about 7 years old, and we started live, running Bitcoin and Ethereum nodes. And then we've got some very large institutions as investors, tier 1 global banks in the US, and they would always say, hey, come run some Hyperledger or some Bezu for us. So, what JJ is mentioning, we see this world where large institutions and enterprises are coming in. We're working with a whole bunch, and they want this ability to be on chain, settle out to public blockchain, but hey, there's a bit where they probably just want to keep it to themselves as well. So we're super excited about, All Things Midnight. We are working with a bunch of L2s as well, and just kind of working through this sort of like hybrid approach where you can effectively, for large institutions and also enterprises as well, get the best of both worlds as well. So we think this, this pure sort of private blockchain, consensus consortia thing, I think that will probably go away, and we start to see settlement out to the big L1s via some, L2s on top as well. So that balance is really important. Specifically for the largest regulated folks. Yeah.
And just to follow up on that too, I think we're seeing a world where private and public can be one chain. And as needed, you can disclose information to regulators, or what we say is there's shielded information and you can unshield that. So as needed, you can reveal the information, and it exists in a private state, but if you need to, you can make it, you can turn it into a public piece of information for whoever needs to see it, for a suspicious activities report, whatever you need. And that means that you can start to, when you have identity and privacy on chain, you can do more.
Fantastic. Definitely trade-offs in the public and private conversation. As there are trade-offs, there is arbitrage. So looking at like geographical arbitrage in particular, it sounds like if we have public-private, if we have different forms of infrastructure, if we have what's good, what's bad, the whole of the world now is like a patchwork of regulation. And institutions are thinking, yes, I might be able to set up in the US or in the UAE or somewhere else, but can I still play the same game in other jurisdictions, or do I have to slightly change my game? How much is that being a factor into institutional growth?
It's a big factor, because right now it's a patchwork, and hopefully we get to a point where there's more of an ability to have businesses in multiple jurisdictions without having to kind of change up the recipe based on where they are. But yeah, right now it is a patchwork, and even in the US we're seeing there's a patchwork federal and state too. It's a little bit like whack-a-mole, just as some of the cases disappeared because the SEC backed off a number of the cases, because at heart those were taxonomy cases. Like, if this is a security, then there is a case here. If we don't believe it's a security, or there's a question about it, there's no case. That's why you saw a lot of cases go away. Not the fraud cases, but you saw those cases go away where that question was core to whether or not the SEC had jurisdiction. But now you're seeing kind of this whack-a-mole approach where you're seeing a number of kind of states taking up that mantle, coming after Coinbase et al. On, are you having unregistered securities on your platform, etc. So, and that creates a lot of resource drain, brain drain, reputational risk that was referred to earlier, all of which is bad for business. So we do need to get to that balance that Andrew was mentioning, whether it's between the privacy side and the areas that can be disclosed, or whether it's how we go about it from a regulatory standpoint. I think one thing that gets mistaken is it's not the question of that we in the crypto industry don't want regulation, just want regulation that makes sense, and that takes work. It takes work not just in the US, but across a number of jurisdictions. And I've spent time in Japan, I'm spending time here now because I'm curious about this environment. We made some acquisitions in Europe, so we're experiencing a variety of jurisdictions, as are our clients and the institutions that we work with. And it's complicated, and it doesn't just end there. Once you figure out kind of the crypto regulation, there's also scenarios of, okay, if we want to move business or bring business back to the States, then there are complicated tax issues of bringing that business back. So there's still a lot of work to be done that keeps us all busy.
And a lot of promise, right? Not to put it back to the US, but there's a lot of other countries and regulators that are looking to the US as a form of best practice, and also just given the depth of the capital market, they kind of need to be in sync with what is happening in the US and under the new administration. And maybe Jason, I'll come to you. Big promises, a lot of excitement in the run up to the summer, let's say, when that sort of 6-month window ends around whether we're going to be regulating ICOs and what the strategic reserve will look like. What's one of the big things or underpriced things that no one's talking about right now, but you're particularly excited for within that review?
Well, again, I think with stablecoins, I think we almost don't fully grasp the magnitude of the change that it's going to require. So I'll make the same point about the Bitcoin reserve, which everyone was happy about because of the price of Bitcoin. But in order for the United States to have a Bitcoin reserve, you need to re-platform the treasury to custody Bitcoin, right? And then it's only a matter of time, having made that investment, before somebody says, why don't we just put the treasuries on chain, right? And so I think people are obviously really very much in recognition, I think, of what's happening on the United States, but I can tell you, I was just at the Securities and Exchange Commission. I had dinner with Commissioner Peirce. I was on a roundtable, and we had the chairman and 3 commissioners in attendance. I cannot underscore the seriousness of this undertaking, at least on the agency side in the United States right now. Just to give you a macro picture, right? The story I tell about the development of the legal frameworks here, right, goes back to 2008, 2009. In the aftermath of that financial crisis, we had the world come together, adopt a principle-based approach to regulation, right? And that's how we ended up with the MiFIDs, and that's how we ended up with the Dodd-Frank. That completely fell apart in the intervening 15 years, right? And I think it's reflective of our geopolitics, but the way that was expressed, and I think we heard today anecdotally an expression of that, right, was you had these regional powerhouses really being able to play on the world stage, coming into the fore, and attracting a lot of digital asset ecosystem talent, right? I actually think the pendulum is about to swing back, and that's why I kind of start with the seriousness and magnitude of what the United States is doing. I think there still is a desire, at least in some portions of the world, for superpower leadership on these issues. I don't actually think we've totally globally seized the opportunity to create regulatory clarity and frameworks that really encourage the adoption of these businesses. And I think the United States might be poised to take back that leadership role.
I like it. I'm looking forward to the tender, re-platform the treasury. I think that's going to create a lot of excitement. So the pendulum swinging back, maybe coming to JJ, you first. You buy this narrative, or do you think that Jason is talking about? The US could now reclaim global leadership, or are there other markets the US spend a lot of time in that you're seeing move also at a very fast pace?
He's totally right, and I think you know something about what's going on there, because the Bitcoin, the United States has a ton of Bitcoin. It's all with the U.S. Marshal right now, and it's locked up. It was all seized during various seizures and what have you. They have a ton of digital assets, but they don't have the proper offices set up to manage those assets. If we do this the wrong way, the U.S. will do something a bit like what Germany did, where they sold $4 billion worth of Bitcoin in one day, in one clip, at one price. They didn't dollar cost average, they didn't try to get a good price, they didn't wait to see on the market, they said we're just going to sell all of it. And I think that we were slow to act, but we still have our assets. And I think with Paul Atkins as the SEC chairman, and with a number of very good commissioners, I also had dinner with Commissioner Peirce a very long time ago. She's been very, very consistent on these issues. I think we have the right leadership in place to save ourselves from disaster and to actually make good on the fact that we've retained these digital assets, put good regulation in place with people like Senator Tim Scott, who's the Senate banking chairman, French Hill, Representative Hill on the House Financial Services Committee, a number of really strong leaders that understand that this stuff is here to stay. It's not going away. We have to figure out a way to live with this new world where digital assets exist, and how do we get a great return for the United States. And of course, the President Trump is very out in front on these issues and wants to make sure that we're winning in these issues and not just participating. So I'm personally encouraged after a very long time in a very adversarial environment in the United States that we could actually become leaders in this, and we didn't shoot ourselves in the foot just yet. So.
And anecdotally, I'd like to add that we're a global company, as mentioned. We've been running our staking operations, including the nexus of the staking capability, outside of the US for the longest period of time, right? This now, what we're seeing is large institutions in the US saying, hey, look, I want to get into staking, I want to do this. Let's talk about that capability being inside the US as well, right? So not only is there a large uptick in demand, it's also the requirement to say, hey, let's onshore as well.
I'll just pop in on the staking point, because when we were launching the spot ETH ETF, I spent a lot of time in DC talking to the SEC, and he knows exactly what I'm going to say. We had to put in bold, we will not use staking in this product, because again, as I mentioned earlier, we were actually surprised we were able to get ETH out as quickly as we did on the heels of Bitcoin because of the question with Gensler's SEC about the status of ETH. But there was not a willingness to take a step further and allow for staking to be placed within these products. There was a thought at that point, well, is the product worth it if you don't have staking, because you're taking away a portion of the value to the investors? So I will say there are a number of very active conversations, including from Bitwise, working with the SEC, talking to the SEC about how staking would work, the different ways staking would work, a number of different methodologies from an operational standpoint. And I do believe that they've migrated their view away from this notion of staking creates an investment contract, which is kind of the technical area where they would not want to allow for this kind of creation of a security with adding staking onto these assets. So a lot of headway is being made, but as we're saying with the patchwork of regulations, the US, we don't have staking yet, conversations going on. There are a number of other jurisdictions who led in ETFs who also have staking on a number of the other assets within those products. So one reason you're here and not in the US, right?
I would also say that not all staking is created the same. Some staking is custodial, and I think we should treat those as custodial products. If I hand over my crypto, I no longer have access, you give me some sort of token in exchange for my real token, I think that's a custodial service. And I say that because Cardano doesn't do that. And that's what we built with IOHK, because you actually hold on to your assets, there's no slashing, there's no bonding period, and you can spend out of the wallet at any time. Now, if we did the hard work to make a product that offers staking returns, and it's not custodial, I think we should have an advantage there, because other services, you hand over your keys, you hand over your assets, and it's essentially like a deposit. And I think we should treat it like that, because not all technology is the same, not all staking is the same, and yet we treat it like that. So,
looking forward to the next product update out of Cardano. Last several minutes, I want to look ahead. Next wave of capital, crystal ball moments for sort of everyone. And one thing that I want to ask, slightly cheekily, is is there a headline this year that would sound crazy today, but in the coming months would sound a lot less crazy? Can be literally anything in the space at all. But one crazy headline that you think could appear this year if you're looking out and very ambitiously on the heels of all of this optimism. Whoever can jump in wants to.
All-time high Bitcoin, $275,000.
Bitcoin at 175,000.
275.
275,000. That is an interesting prediction for sure. Jason, you raised your mic and then raised it away very fast.
I've been directed to sell at 120, so I just.
Okay, we'll stay on Bitcoin price, and obviously feel no pressure to make any predictions here. But
yeah, I'll go. I think we're starting to see, and we are going to see, the narrative around Bitcoin staking. To JJ's points, there is a difference in the technologies there. Like, we're supporting some of these protocols as well. Some of them have a custodial element as well. But technology projects on top of Bitcoin staking and yield. personally, I think this is going to be a really big area for the next sort of 6 to 9 months, and we see how this plays out. It's still very early, but yeah.
Let's say market structure legislation approved in the United States. We're talking about it for years, hoping this is the year.
I'm enjoying seeing market structure come back, just plastered across above headlines, the way that people are thinking about it. Cool, we have 5 minutes left. I want to look at one final question, which is the most underpriced regulatory risk, right? It can be things we've already explored, it can be new areas, but it sounds like institutions have a lot to think about coming into the space or deepening their exposure to the asset class or infrastructure that we talked about. What is one underpriced risk that you think institutions should be taking more of a look at as they think about the evolution?
Yeah, I'll just jump in. Obviously Fireblocks is an infrastructure company. I think, again, it's poorly understood, and I think it's probably the most important thing to get right. And I've said this in other fora, but I think now is the time for us to really focus on this issue. As a global community, I think the expertise resides with the digital asset ecosystem, so I think it's incumbent upon us to really come up with the right answers. But we need to have some sort of global coordination. We need it around digital identity. I believe we need it around infrastructure issues. The reason the time to do this is right now and not some other time in the future. We have new legal frameworks coming into place. Let's take MiCA as an example. So what that framework is going to do is going to take a whole bunch of crypto firms and exchanges, et cetera, who otherwise were not regulated previously, and it's going to start transitioning them to a regulated environment, including one where they need to have third-party risk management practices. The same thing is going to happen in a way for financial institutions, right? So I have predicted here that stablecoins are going to be a huge driver, bringing financial institutions into the market. I don't think it's going to stop there. As I said, if we're going to re-platform financial institutions, these are some of the most important and largest financial companies in the world, right? Why don't we just do it right from the start? So again, for these two reasons, we're going to be taking a cohort that has existed in crypto but has not been regulated in their existence in crypto, and we're taking the financial institutions and we're moving them into crypto. So I think the risk is that we get the infrastructure layer wrong.
Thank you, Katherine.
Yeah, I think there definitely is the aspect of the underpinning infrastructure, right? So you can approve up here, and it sounds great from an academic standpoint, but all the sides have to communicate. So from making sure that all works and is properly done, right? So even for the Bitwise, the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, I'm highly supportive of that. But a lot of work has to be done, some of which is outlined in the executive order with regard to, because it's not just the marshals, it's a number of different entities in the US. I was a federal prosecutor for a decade, so I used to do some of these, forfeitures and reclaiming, right? But so there hasn't been an audit done of where these assets reside, Bitcoin and other digital assets. So first and foremost, an audit. Like who has it? Who's holding it? How is it being held, to Jason's point? How are we doing that safely? Because billions have already been lost in selling these at the wrong time. So that infrastructure buildup. So you have this great idea. I'm tremendously supportive of it. But there's a lot of work that has to be done around the edges to make sure it's done right and kept safe.
Fantastic, sorry, Jacob.
In brief, this market structure bill, when they talk about market structure, it's whether something is a commodity or a security is kind of a reductive view of what this might look like. I think if they go with an approach where everything starts out as a security and then becomes a commodity, it could become disastrous. It's very, very difficult for a project to comply with securities law when it's brand new. And we've seen some regulators head in this direction. And I would encourage people to think about it in terms of a third asset class, not a commodity or a security, but a digital asset, which is totally different, because the opportunity cost of forcing all of these firms to comply with securities law would be extraordinary. And I think it's a very simple thing that people think, okay, Bitcoin is a commodity, that's the test. If it's as decentralized as Bitcoin, it's a commodity, and everything else is a security. I think this is a reductive, disastrous take, and I think they have to be very thoughtful about how they structure the market for the future, otherwise teams will never reach that escape velocity.
A word of warning. And Andrew, final comment from you.
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting year. Really looking forward to it. I think, you know, like I said, you know, we just continue to see, you know, an enormous amount of inbound from institutions on all the topics we've been mentioning on this panel, right? So, keen to see where we get to at the end of the year here. Like we spoke about, I've just recently moved from Singapore, 2 months in UAE. The procession to UAE keeps continuing. It's really interesting. As soon as you tell people you're moving here, you'll get an influx of like, hey, like I'm thinking about it, or hey, I am moving. So, you know, I'm really looking forward to, you know, the market opportunity here as well. And I think it was definitely the right decision for Blockdaemon, you know, to build out an entity and make the investment in UAE. Yeah.
Andrew is available for one-to-one consultations if you're thinking about relocating.
If that wasn't clear.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, a huge thank you to our panelists, to Katherine, Jason, JJ, and Andrew, and our dear friend Abdullah, who sadly had to depart, but we managed to get a few cents of wisdom from him. So, massive thank you. It's going to be an exciting year, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, James.